We're continuing in the book of Romans, and being kind of raised from a teenager up in Florida, I came to know a little bit about citrus, and probably more than I wanted to know. But I found out that the really good fruit, like tangelos and mandarins and tangerines and good navel oranges, and the better fruit is not natural to the root system that it has. Let me explain that. They take a sour orange, which is very hardy and able to withstand cold and bugs and everything else, and they graft in branches from tangerines, mandarins, mercots, all of the better fruit oranges into this very hardy rootstock. And they actually make a small cut into the sour rootstock and graft in the branches that will bear the good fruit. I learned all of that because I had a nice tree that was bearing tangelos, and someone told me we were getting ready to have a freeze. Somebody told me to put the garden hose on it and let it run overnight to keep the tree from freezing. Well, it was a bad choice because during the middle of the night we lost power and the water stopped running. And so what happened was the tree froze, and I was ready to dig it up until the next season. I started to see some blossoms on it, and I got excited and thought I didn't lose my tree after all. But the fruit that it produced was sour oranges, not tangelos. And so I learned that what had been grafted in had been killed off by the cold, and the sour rootstock was all that was left and was useless. So, but in any case, here we are in Romans chapter 11, verses 17 through 24. Some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them and became partakers with them of the rich root of the olive tree. So some of the branches of the olive tree were broken off, and we who were the wild olives were grafted in and became partakers in the rich root of the olive tree. Now, what does that all mean? Well, the original olive tree, the rich root olive tree, was the Jews. And we, being Gentiles, were grafted in, and we became partakers of the rich root. But it has a warning too. It says, don't be arrogant towards the branches that were broken off. Remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root that supports you. And so we got to be real careful that we don't think that we're better than the Jews. They were broken off. Not all Jews were broken off to start with, but it is the Jewish root that supports us, that is Jesus, not ourselves. And then it goes on and says that the branches were broken off so that you might be grafted in. And so we see in these verses, as we continue on down towards verse 24, another warning which says, for God did not spare the natural branches, he will certainly not spare us either. Behold the kindness and the severity of God to those who failed to trust in him, to fail to believe in him. And so we see this in verse 23. It says, and they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, they'll be grafted back in, for God is able to graft them in. And that's why we find so many completed Jews. They're being grafted back into the original stock, the original Jewish race, because they have believed in Jesus as Savior, see that he is the Messiah. For if you were cut off from what is the natural wild olive tree and were grafted into the natural olive tree, how much more will these that are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? So we see that there's Jews and Gentiles on the olive tree, Jesus. And we don't want to be arrogant about the Jews, because many of them are believers and will become believers and believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But the beauty is that we're going to have to remember that the power that the abilities, that everything that we can do as Christians comes from the root, comes from Jesus. Without him we can do nothing. With him we can do all things. And we need to remember that. We also need to remember that the Jewish rootstock is getting grafted in. A number of Jews, they've become completed Jews, understand the Messiah as Jesus, and have been grafted in, and we shouldn't be arrogant towards Jews. As a matter of fact, we should recognize that God has set that land and that people aside as being very special to him. And so you'll find all of that interesting information in Romans 11, verses 17 through 24. And you'll find, if you look up citrus trees and grafting, you'll find that this is a beautiful picture of what happens with Christians as they're grafted into Jesus. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you. Have a great day.